Big old shout out to our friends over at Game Press for providing us a copy of this game for review purposes. Thanks, gang. Hello, this is Tim at Wembembo on Everything, back with a small episode of DLC, this time on the recently launched Occupy Mars. Now, Occupy Mars, if I just pull up the Steam store page here, is a game that's developed and published by Pyramid Games, and it's also published by Playway SA. It is a colonization sim where you play as a singular astronaut amongst many astronauts on a base that is setting up a colony on Mars. To quote the Steam blurb, survive and colonize Mars in a highly technical open world sandbox game. Build and upgrade your base, discover new regions, construct mining operations, retrieve water, generate oxygen, grow crops, and fix broken parts. Yeah, that is what you do for the most part of the game. I found in the 3 hours that I put into this, and I know this seems like a really short amount of time, but there is a very valid reason for it, that you are largely doing tick box exercises. Go retrieve this, go fix that, go, I don't know, process some food. At one point, one of my instructions was to use the toilet and then dump the waste into the compost so the compost would allow the plants to grow quicker. This sort of thing. All the while, your suit and your oxygen and your hunger and your thirst and your sleep are all depleting, so you need to keep this up. So on top of it being a colony survival sim, there's also an element of survival crafting in there, and we all know how much I love that. So the reason I only put in about 3 hours into this title was because it is horrifically buggy. There are technical merits to the game. As I record this, I'm looking at, on my left monitor here, a series of weather effects that can happen, including things like dust tornadoes and lightning storms and storms and all this stuff. But at the same time, it feels like that the game could not quite get the basics right. The game greets you when you first boot it up with Made in Unity, and oh boy does it feel like it. Not to disparage any, good games that are made in Unity, but this feels very rough around the edges, and there are some technical merit, as I said. The open world feels big, because it's supposed to be emulating Mars. The scope of things that you can do feel vast, in a kind of good way, in like a, oh, okay, cool, I can do that sort of sense. But like, most of the stuff is pretty menial work. It just, to me, it feels like a game for someone who's really into survival crafting and possibly into base building, and I like base building stuff, but man, was this not grabbing me, like, at all. And just to go back to what I was saying about this feeling like a Unity game, I first tried this on the Steam Deck, but I ran into crashes as early as 15 minutes of playtime, which is not a good start. But then I would just run into crashes anytime I closed the start menu. And to be clear, I'm running a OLED Steam Deck, the 1TB model, so top of the line model. Really, it shouldn't have a hard time running this, so I decided to go and run it on my PC. And sure enough, the first time I boot the game, I am met with a crash before I even reach the title screen. And then I find out that I have to do the tutorial all over again. Granted, that could be a Steam issue. Maybe I selected the wrong option on the start menu to boot the game. I don't know. However, when doing the tutorial, I thought it would be funny, and this is completely on me, I'll admit, I thought it would be funny to remove my helmet the moment I got out of, the base, just to see if I could pop it back on, maybe have, a little moment with the health scare. No, the game immediately killed me, which, yeah, that's valid, but I was then met with a loading screen that said, "Your ship is approaching Mars, this may take a few minutes." I then had to wait 15 minutes for this game to load, only for it to dump me at the start of the tutorial again. So I had to do everything I'd done on the Steam Deck again, and everything I'd done on the PC again, just because, you know, I thought it would be fun to goof around, even though I was very much done with at least the first portion of the tutorial. Occupy Mars went into full release on January 30th, and this basic level of functionality in terms of making sure your game doesn't crash for doing basic things like leaving a start menu, this should have been fixed a long time ago, and it just feels really cheap. It doesn't feel good to play, at least in my opinion. The missions aren't satisfying, at least in my opinion. The rewards for doing the quests aren't satisfying, in my opinion. And you know what? Maybe it's a late game thing. Maybe once you hit that 10 or 20 hour mark, things really start to go up a gear. But I couldn't get there. I ran into crashes. I ran into constantly low frame rates. I know my PC is a little old, and I know my Steam Deck isn't as powerful as my PC, but you know, I shouldn't be seeing varying frame rates that range from maybe 20 frames per second to 40. I couldn't even keep a stable 45 frames per second on this game, and I think it's because the open world. I think the main problem with this game is that, yes, it knows what it wants to do, but it's treating it as a sprint and not a marathon, when this is clearly a game that's built for longevity. It wants you to get into the open world, but it doesn't pace itself, and so you're almost overwhelmed with options in a tutorial like that. To be clear, most of my time was spent in the tutorial. The game has overwhelmed you with these options and presented you with a UI that it basically has to walk you through step by step instead of presenting it in a really organic way. And on top of that, you're just tasked with go talk to the doctor, go talk to the general, go talk to the vehicle specialist. And they just have this dialogue that is really uninteractive and just screams wall of text. I don't think I can really recommend this game in its current state. I think it's meant for someone. I think it's meant for people who enjoy colony sims and space and are willing to put up with a game that's, to be fair, being constantly patched. But it's not for me. I can tell you that much. I don't enjoy survival crafting games these days. I don't really have an interest in just, go have at it in terms of an open world thing. I want objectives, and while this game gave me objectives, it was pretty, tedious grunt work. This game didn't make me feel like the protagonist, though. It made me feel like a cog in the machine. And while that's fine, and I get that obviously a large space colony is going to require lots of people to work, normally you would have one person dedicated to one job. If I think back to a game that I played recently, Legitimate Space Corps Simulator, my role on that ship was to run a space gas station, so you're basically a shop or petrol station clerk. That's a defined job. Whereas this was just do a bit of everything. It felt like it lacked focus. I can't recommend this in its current state. This has been Tim, at Wembembo on everything, and I'll see you next time.